Hey, today I'm going to show you how to make this layout, this practice layout for lesson 4 in web design. A little overview, it's got a container to hold all of the divs in it. It's got a div called header here, a div called navigation. Then there's a sidebar here. I can tell it must be floating to the left because there's content on the right side of it. There's a content div right here, and it must be floating to the right. And then this footer div, it's down at the bottom because it has a property of clear both on it. Let's go to Dreamweaver and make that now. In Dreamweaver, I'm going to start out by making new styles, new CSS rule. I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to make a bunch of IDs because those boxes, those divs are IDs. First one I'm going to call container. Type container. I'm going to make this in an external style sheet. I'm going to make a new style sheet. I only have to do this once. Click OK, and I'm going to name it main. I'm just in the habit of naming my style sheets main, and I already have a root folder set up, so it's going to put my main document in my root folder. I'm going to describe this box. It says that it's 900 pixels wide in the instructions, and then I have auto margins on the right and left, and that will make that div hover in the middle of the browser window. If I click on this little triangle over here, you'll see that I have one rule now, container. There's no div out here yet. I have to insert that. I'm going to insert that later. I'm going to describe all my divs at one time. So div ID, the next one is header, using lowercase letters. I'm going to make sure it goes into my main CSS, and I'm going to click OK. This one has a height of 120. I don't usually describe the height of a div, but I will for the header. And I don't give it a width because it occupies the whole width of the container, so I don't have to give it a width. I'm going to give it a background color just to keep things interesting. I'll give it this darker gray color there. Click OK. Now I got my header. I'm going to make another new rule. This one I'm going to make an ID, and it's going to be navigation. Going into my main CSS, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go to box, and the only thing I'm going to change about this is it says my navigation has a padding of 5 pixels. I'm going to click OK. 5 pixels all around. I'm going to make another new one. This one is called, it's an ID again, and it's called sidebar, lowercase. Sidebar going into my main CSS. This one is a little more interesting because it is floating to the left. Float left. Whenever you use float, almost all the time you have to use a width. My instructions say that the width is 250 pixels. This is going to have some type in it, and I want to push the type away from the edge of the box, so I'm going to put 10 pixels of padding in there, and then it has a background color. What do we want to put in for background? We'll put in CCC and see what that looks like. All right, that one is done. I'm going to put in my content div next, make a new CSS rule. It's an ID. It's called content. Let's go into my main CSS, and it looks like this. It is, according to the instructions, 600 pixels wide, and it's floating right. And that's about all there is to that one. I'm going to click OK. More and more, one more I think. Click on this to make one more new rule. It's an ID, and this is the footer. Click OK. I'm not going to give the footer a width. I'm going to box here. I'm not going to give the footer a width because it's going to occupy the whole space. I'm going to set it to clear both, and that's going to force it down to the bottom of all the content. I'm going to give it a background. I'm going to give it a background color, and I'm going to give it 5 pixels of padding to push the type away from the edge of the box. Background color of 999. We'll try that. Okay. Now I have all of my rules, all of my styles over here. Let's insert them on the page. I'm going to click on my Insert tab here and go to Insert Div Tag. What div would you like to insert? I'd like to insert my container, and I'll do it right at the insertion point because I just have the body selected out here. So there's my container div. I'm going to insert the header now. Insert div tag. I'm going to choose the header. Where do I want it? I want it to be the first thing inside my container. So after the start of tag, container. My container is just a tag, just an HTML tag, and the first thing after the start of my container tag is going to be my header. Click OK. There it is. My header's inside of my container tag. Right under the header is my navigation. Insert div tag. I'm going to choose navigation. Where do I want it? I want it to come right after the header. So after tag, it's going to come after the header. Click OK. There's my navigation right there. I will type links in there later, but now I'm going to insert my sidebar. Insert div tag. I'm going to choose the sidebar. I want that to come after tag because it's the first thing after the navigation. So it should be right down here if everything is right. Yes, the first thing after the navigation is my sidebar. Interesting that the container is not going down below the sidebar. That's because the sidebar is floating, the container is not floating, and things that are not floating ignore things that are floating. Let's insert another div tag. Insert div tag. The next one is going to be content. And that also comes after a tag. It comes after my sidebar. The first thing after my sidebar, the first thing after my sidebar is going to be content. Click OK. There's my content floating to the right, just like we told it to. And then the last thing, we're going to put a footer in here, and it's going to go down below everything. Insert div tag. I'm going to choose my footer, and I want it to be, I could do after tag, but I like to do before end of tag. I want it to be the last thing inside my container. The last thing before the closing tag of my container div. Click OK. There's my footer down there. And now you can start inputting content. You could put in here, in this assignment, it's home, and then I hit a space bar and the shift vertical bar. Autumn, sports, another vertical bar, winter sports. So you can put in your links. I'll let you work on that. And then put in some content over here. We put in a subhead called subordinate stuff. And then I make that I think I make that an H2. I'm going to delete this content for ID container goes here because it's annoying. And then over here, that's where our main content will go. Park, and rec. And then you fill in the content. But that's how you lay out those divs. The header div, again, has no width because it fills the whole space of the container. The navigation is the same way. The sidebar 1 div has a float left property, and it's a width of 250. Has to have the width. This div, the content div, has a width of 600 and it's floating to the right. And then the footer div is set to clear both, and that's why it always goes down to the bottom. You could preview that in a browser if you wanted. Sure, you got to save changes. And then it's going to ask me if I want to save the style sheet too. The external style sheet is technically not saved yet. Click yes. And there's my beautiful layout in Safari. So there, try that on your own.